What's going on, guys? BustUp86 here, back to your video, and today I have yet another retrospective review for you guys. And today I'm going to be doing a very special ranking of a band that I have been a fan of for the past 4 years now. And of course, that is none other than Canadian's own Slayer, Razor. This band has certainly one of the most intriguing, I guess you could say, discographies that I've personally listened to, considering that this band is, I would kind of say, one of the most underrated bands of all time, because they have probably put out one of the best runs in terms of album output, I would say, of all of the decade of the 80s, considering that this band, highly influenced by Motorhead and highly influenced by some other bands, which I'm going to get to here in a bit. And I'm very glad to be doing this ranking. So before I get to the band's history, I want to talk about how I got into this band. So it was around, I think it was around the COVID and pandemic era when I was still in school and I was still trying to get into metal, and I was listening to the more heavier, I guess you could say, new metal slash alternative bands like the Slipknots and the Korns. But I slowly transitioned into listening to like Judas Priest and Exodus and Motorhead and Testament and a little bit of Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath. And then I watched this guy do this little metal series on his channel. And if you guys know who I'm talking about, you'll know immediately what I'm talking about. Of course, I am referring to Razorfist Metal Mythos series that he does. So basically, what Razorfist does, he basically just does a entire discography run of bands that he likes, and this one always grabbed my attention, considering the sound bites that he used and the samples of songs that he used, and what I heard was absolutely phenomenal. And let's just say this band just goes full on Bullet Train speed when it comes to the riffage, and yeah, it's absolutely great. So yeah, I was willing to get into this band, and lo and behold, I did, and they're one of my favorite bands of all time. So this is going to be a bit of a shorter ranking too, considering they only have 9 albums. But stay tuned, because this one's going to be a bit of a ranking, a bit of an interesting ranking. And plus, I have my water with me because I've been dealing with some sinus issues lately. So if I sound a bit dry, you'll understand why. So with that being said, without wasting time, let's get into the awesome discography of Razor. So it's band formed in 1983 in Guelph, Ontario, Canada by guitarist Dave Carlo. But then guitarist and vocalist John Schiffel would join but would leave in 84. After some failed lineups, Carlo would find a stable lineup with vocals Stace Sheepdog McLaren, bassist Mike Campagnolo, and drummer Mike M. Embro. And the founding members, the guitarist and the rhythm section, were formed by former schoolmates, fun fact. A 5-track demo was recorded in 84 prior to the release of the Armed and Dangerous EP in May of 84 by Voice Records. And I'm not going to be including Armed and Dangerous because again, that's the EP and I don't do EPs. But if I were, it will probably be maybe top 5. That's an awesome EP. Literally, they have the entire lineup. They just needed the vocalist, and Sheepdog fit the band like a glove on that one. And the Armed Dangerous EP received much underground acclaim. A pre-production demo titled Escape the Fire was recorded in December of 84, which would become the full length in April of 85 through Attic Records. And we get that album. And you may notice a bit of a theme with this. I don't know the actual dates per se. I've looked on Metal Archives and Wikipedia, and these are the dates I can actually find. So apologize for all the smarks out there saying, well, it was actually recorded on this day. I apologize, this is all I really found. So in sometime of April in 1985, we would get Executioner Song. This is my number 5. As a debut, it's a pretty damn good debut if you ask me. This band was really trying to dip their toes in the water and just make an album just to see what they got, and I'd say they put out a pretty damn good album if you ask me. Now, I will admit, there are times I think the Armed and Dangerous songs are better than the ones on the actual album, but but it's the other way around. But really damn good songs like Take This Torch, the aforementioned Escape the Fire, March of Death, Distant Thunders, where they got a little more groovy. Really nice, tasty leads on that one. Hot Metal, Time Bomb's pretty good. This is a pretty damn good album, and a little bit of an interesting fact here. Dave actually hates the production of this album due to the record label's involvement, and yeah, there's a lot of lo-fi on this album. It's not really well produced. You can still hear everything pretty fine, but there's just a lot of lo-fi on the songs in question. And I don't necessarily blame Dave for the kind of murky production, but it still sounds solid. But it could have just been a little better quality. They could have turned a few knobs, if you ask me. But all in all, really damn good stuff. My number 5. And if you excuse me, quick drink break. So, with basically the band just having an album in their back, they did a little bit of a touring, and about 6 months later, we get into October of 1985, and they will release Evil Invaders. This is my number 4. Take everything they kind of messed up on Executioner Song and do it a lot better here. This is where they really up the speed and aggression when it comes to that thrashy speed metal sound and top-notch songs throughout. And Sheepdog's vocals gets a little more gruff and a little more rough, especially like he kind of sounds like Lemmy from Motorhead, which if that's what they're going for, they absolutely nailed it. But the opening instrumental of Nowhere Fast is really good. The title track's a classic. Cross Me Fool's great. Tortured Skull has some of the best screams in Sheepdog's entire career. Legacy of Doom, Instant Death, Cutthroat, Speed Merchants, Thrash Dance is really good. And a little fun fact, those were actually the original titles for the album, but the record label had different ideas, and I'll be completely honest, I actually like the direction they went with that, considering that they didn't know if it was sold well, in my opinion, with Thrash Dance or Speed Merchants, but Evil Invaders, that would have been, I think that was a better idea in terms of sales wise. I think that was a smarter idea, but absolutely amazing stuff. I do think this is a classic amongst the 80s, and yeah, it's my number 4. So after Invaders, they would tour in the States with Slayer, Venom, and Motorhead, which, I mean, right there, that sounds like a pretty kick-ass lineup if you ask me. You have 3 of the most influential bands of the thrash and speed metal genre right there and then. So, I mean, good job, guys, on that. So, about a year later, we get into April of 1986. We would get Malicious Intent. This is my number 3. I messed it up big time. This is my number 3. This album is absolutely awesome, and I would dare say probably one of the most underrated albums of the 80s in terms of not a lot of people really talk about this album per se. They always talk about Evil Invaders and they kind of skip over this album as a whole, but I would say this is Evil Invaders Part 2, but just a hair bit better. Production, I think, got a little bit better. I think the songwriting got a little more tight on this album. And Sheepdog just sounds absolutely phenomenal as well. And you can hear the band kind of going in a different direction because there's even some like classic metal tropes on this album, especially with songs like Challenge the Eagle and High Speed Metal. But you get those amazing like token razor riffs like Tear Me to Pieces, which is a phenomenal opening track. Night Attack, Grindstone, Cage the Ragers, the title track, which is this really nice mid-tempo track. Rebel Onslaught. This is just a killer album. Like, this and Evil Invaders can honestly be neck and neck, but I just think Malicious Intent is just a hair bit better. But this album, absolutely awesome. I think it's a little bit better than Evil Invaders, but it's a phenomenal album in its own right. My number 3. So, unfortunately, this didn't have without its negatives. It did suffer due to the buildup of internal conflicts within the band and the lack of an official release in the States, which in turn led to the record company dropping the band. But French Product would pick up the band, and into the studio they went. And around in July of 1987, we would get Custom Killing. This is my dead last. This is my number 9, and the quality just dropped off from here, and it kind of sucks to say, considering that you can tell the band was going through a lot of different ideas at this time, because Sheepdog, he basically wanted to take the Megadeth route and go a little more melodic, but also keeping that songwriting in tow. But Dave Carlo wasn't really feeling it, and he just was kind of like, well, here, we'll just put out this. And yeah, you could tell that there was a lot of creative differences going on with the band, because there's a lot of random stuff on this album. Like, and considering that 1987, I think, was an absolutely killer year for thrash bands, especially on the Bay Area side, like Testament, Overkill, Exodus, um, Anthrax were released, Among the Living. It's just, I don't know. It just, this album just felt lost in the shuffle, and there were some decent tracks on here. I don't think Razor has a flat out bad album, and there's some actually decent tunes on here, but it just didn't feel like a Razor album. It felt like 10 different things going on. Like, there's some decent riffs on here, but not really a whole lot. And not to mention, this has two of the longest songs on the band's entire catalog, with two of them over 11 minutes. So yeah, you could tell there was you could tell that bands were butting heads at this point. But Shootout's alright. Force Annihilation has some solid moments. White Noise, I think, is a pretty solid track, but it's just, it just doesn't feel like Razor album. They lost a lot of the speed of aggression on this album. There's a lack of intensity, and the production. This might be the worst production job in the band's entire career, because this thing is thin. This thing is paper thin. It's just, it in a way sounds like a demo, if anything, and it doesn't feel, it just, again, it doesn't feel like a Razor album to me. So yeah, again, there's some decent tracks, but all in all, it's not really that great of an album. Overall, my number 9. But unfortunately, this will be the last album with Mike Embro on drums and Mike Campagnolo on bass. Enter Dave's brother Adam to be on bass, and drummer Rob Mills. And this new album will be on Steamhammer Records, or SPV for you Sodom fans, myself included. But then 1988 came around, and this band took all the critical acclaim and the negativity that Custom Killing had, and say, all right, we're going to basically just go full on balls to the wall on Sandy with this album. And boy, did they. Because in 1988, we would get Violent Restitution. This was my clear-cut number 1. And going into it, I knew it was going to be my number 1. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. Take everything, literally everything they messed up on Custom Killing, and just apply it here. The speed and aggression was back. The riffs got a lot more meatier and got a lot more mean. The production, I would dare say, the finest production job in the band's entire catalog. The drum work by Rob Mills is fucking incredible. And the riffs are some of the cleanest and tightest riffs you'll ever hear when it comes to especially thrash and speed metal. I mean, from the opening scream on the martial arts, which is probably one of my favorite instrumentals of all time, we are off to the races with this bad boy. Hypertension, Taste the Floor, Behind Bars, Below the Belt, I'll Say It Once, Enforcer, the title track, one of my personal favorites. Edge of the Razor, Even the Storm, Discipline, Soldier of Fortune. The two standout tracks, though, Out of the Game and Fed Up. Out of the Game is probably my favorite Razor song that they've ever done. Full on, just a really nice riff at the beginning, has a nice little build up, and then it just goes full on into the speed and aggression. Absolutely killer stuff. And then when you get Fed Up, you have a little bit of social commentary, mainly taking aim at Sheepdog, basically saying, um, "I'm fed up with your attitude. I'm fed up with the people you hang out with." Yeah, you look into the lyrical context of it. Yeah, you may understand there may be some more tension than we actually thought of, but absolutely killer stuff. And also, did I mention that this album is dedicated to Charles Bronson? Because this album is dedicated to Charles Bronson. And to quote Razorfist, this is the ultimate soundtrack to Death Wish 3. I rest my case there. But yeah, Final Restitution, absolutely classic album, my number one. So this album would be praised heavily by fans and critics alike, but unfortunately, this marriage would end. After Sheepdog would be less and less interested in the band, he would end up leaving. Enter his replacement, former yeah, S, SFH vocalist Bob Reed. And the band would then sign with Fringe Product that they just recently did with Custom Killing. So, in March of 1990, we would get Shotgun Justice. This is my number two. This, in my opinion, is where they embrace the thrash. Kind of the more so speed metal stuff is basically gone, but they have that speed metal in mind and just applied it to the thrash. This album is one of the most hostile albums of the 1990s, and I would dare say might be better than most albums that was released in 1990 alone, considering you have Painkiller, Rust in Peace, you have Persistence of Time, what's another album that was released? Songs, Better Off Dead, and not to mention the death metal bands around this time were making some damn good stuff too, like Spiritual Healing, for example. This I might think might be better than all of them, and it's just absolutely phenomenal from start to finish. Miami's a really good opener. United by Hatred, Violence Condoned, The Electric Torture, The Meaning of Pain, Stabbed in the Back, Parasite, Burning Bridges, Concussion, Cranial Stamp, The Pugilist, I think they say that. But the title track, one of my favorite Razor songs of all time, top 5 in my personal opinion. The only track I don't really care for is American Luck. And musically, the album's really good. Or that song's really good, considering that it has a really nice bass intro. But the lyrics are more rants, if you ask me. Basically, Dave is basically saying, oh, well, if we were America, we would get more notoriety. Okay, here's a question. Why didn't you move to the States when you had the chance? I'm just saying, Dave, you're kind of just ranting and raving for basically nothing when you could have fixed that. But that's neither here nor there. This album is absolutely amazing. I love this album. And yeah, it's my number two. So, they would headline smaller I'm sorry, venues performing with Sacrifice and Disciples of Power. Unfortunately, Rob Mills got into an accident which made him unavailable to perform. Adam will leave and then be replaced by SFH bassist John Armstrong. And for this new album, they would unfortunately have to get R2D2, aka a drum machine, to fill in for Rob and basically try to program all the style that Rob Mills would do. So then we get into 1991, we would get Open Hostility. This is my number 6. As a follow-up to Shotgun Justice, it is a bit of a... It is narrowed down a bit, but I do think it is a really, really, really solid follow-up in the outside of things. And this album, I kind of feel like it's underrated, considering that it it was released in 91, and it, again, following up two phenomenal albums in Violent Restitution and Shotgun Justice, a lot was left to be desired with this one. But I think this album is pretty damn good at the outset of things. They really kept up with that. They were really keeping up with the momentum that they had with Shotgun Justice. And I think this album is really good. Red Money's really good, and Protest is a really nice opener. Sucker for Punishment, Red Gunner, Iron Legions, Mental Torture, Psychopath, End of the War is really good. I really love the riffing, and I love Dave's guitar tone on this album. This guitar tone is nasty. However, I do have to admit, the drum machine is pretty bad on this album, and they could have done a better job to hide it, but unfortunately they didn't. It just sounds a little too loud in the mix. But I mean, what can he do? And Bob Reed, he sounds pretty damn good on this album as well. He sounds a lot more gruff on the album as well. So yeah, really good follow up, but compared to Shotgun Justice, it is a bit of a downgrade if you ask me. But still really good. My number 6. So, Mills would later return and the band would embark on a tour for Open Hostility leading up into their final performance on October 2nd of 1992. Following the tour, they would go on hiatus. They would split up. But a compilation named Exhumed was issued by Fringe Product during the band's absence. However, in 1996, Razor would be active again by the idea from Bob Reed saying, hey, why don't we just reform again? And everyone was on board. Both Reed and Carlo were joined by Armstrong and SFH drummer Rich Oosterbosch. I think that's how you say his name. I severely apologize. And this next album would actually be released on Hypnotic Records. So we would get into 1997. They will release Decibels. This is my second to last. This is my number 8. And I hate to say this because this is cliche as hell, but this album was a product of its time. And considering that 1997 wasn't really a great year for thrash fans, especially with both the German and the American side, where bands were going more groove metal, some were even going goth, Looking at You, Creator, and some were just getting lost in the shuffle, and some would even go with new metal. I'm Looking at You, Slayer. Razor didn't really go that route. This did, in a way, felt like a proper follow-up to Open Hostility, but it's just a lot weaker because there's a lot of filler on this album. The production, I would say, got a little bit worse, and considering that it sounds like a drum machine when it's not really, makes it a little bit worse. But there are still some damn good tracks on this album. Like, the title track's really good. Life Sentence is pretty fun. Great White Lie's really good. Nine Dead's pretty solid. But the one track that's a big standout for me is Violence Gun Control. That song in particular is just over 7 minutes, and I really love the story it tells. It talks about gun control basically, and how basically how out of control it's been. Considering we live in a state now where it's even more uncontrollable, that's saying a whole lot. So, yeah, despite my problems with the album, there were still some decent tracks on here. And another thing I should have mentioned too, the vocals are really odd on this album. Like, they sound very industrialized, and I didn't really care for that per se. But Bob still puts on a really good performance throughout. But yeah, in terms of the final album of the 90s, it was a bit of a disappointment, but there's still some pretty good tracks on this album. So all in all, it's my number 8. So after this, Armstrong and Oosterbosch will leave and be replaced by returning members not Dave Mills, sorry, I'm thinking of the quarterback for the Texans, by Rob Mills and Dave Carlo before being replaced by Mike Campagnolo. They took part of the Gates of Hell tour in 2005, Headbangers Open Air Festival in 2009, and the True Thrash Festival in Osaka, Japan in 2011. So that's pretty cool. But we have some unfortunately troubling news. On April 19th of 2012, Carlo was diagnosed with stage 2 oral cancer. But fortunately for him, it was treated and he resumed to his guitar duties in 2015. The band performed at a charity event in 2014, Maryland Death Fest in 2015, and California Death Fest in 2016. In 2014, Mills will leave and be replaced by Ripped drummer Ryder Johnson. And this new album they finally would make 25 years later will be released on Relapse Records. So, after being in a hiatus and being studio bound for 25 years. Back to Suddenly don't remember my words. Into the recording studio they went. September 23rd, 2022, we begin Cycle of Contempt. Now, I remember I did a review of this album when it came out, and you guys may notice I may have liked the album a little too much, considering that, well, this was one of my favorite bands, and they finally made an album after 25 years. Re-listening to it, yeah, I may have overhyped it just a little bit too much. With that being said, it is my number 7. I do think it is still a solid album on the outset of things, but re-listening to it again, I guess my fandom got to the better of me and kind of just ignored the fact that half this album is pretty good and half of it is just meh. Like, I do think there are some solid tracks on this album, but this album is kind of dumb and not in a fun way. Like, there are some like really good tracks I do like on this album. Like the opening "Flames of Hatred's" really good. Title track's really good. I really love "A Bitter Pill." That's probably my favorite track on here. Jabroni, I like that song because of how funny it is. Darkness Falls is pretty good, and King Ship because why not? But everything else just kind of feels random and just feels like a lot of filler on the album. Like there was not a whole lot of standouts. I do have issues. One, the production. The drums are a bit too loud for my liking. You don't really hear the guitars at all. And I felt like they could have done a lot better with the lyrics, but that's neither here nor there. And I'll kind of give the album a little bit of credit. It does kind of have like a bit of a hardcore vibe to it, but they could have done a lot better with this album. So it's immediately a bit of a disappointing effort, but hopefully now that they're on a bigger record label, they can maybe get more tours in the States and finally they can make a little more albums while they still can. So yeah, it's a solid album, but nothing spectacular. It is my number 7. And as far as I know, if any updates, apparently Ryder Johnson did leave, I think, in 2023. So the drummer spot at this point is kind of left to be determined. But as far as I know, this band is on tour, and if you guys ever have a chance to see them, I would highly suggest, even though I've never been to personally. So, folks, that is it with my Razor ranking. This one was a little bit shorter than I anticipated, considering it's only been a month since I did Accept, but finally got this out, so that way I can finally move on to the other rankings that I'm going to be doing. So, what was your favorite Razor album, folks? Let me know in the comment section below, and before I leave, what band am I going to be doing next? Well, if you guys have seen the polls on my community tab, you guys know what thrash act I'm going to be doing next. And of course, the next band I'm going to be doing is none other than Anthrax. That one's going to be a interesting listen for yours truly. So, yeah, again, what was your favorite Razor album? Let me know in the comment section below. Make sure you guys leave a like, leave a comment, tap that big red subscribe button, and tap the bell so when I upload, you guys will be notified. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Most importantly, join the herd. Check us next video. Peace out.